Yeah.
And so that was my first foray into sales. You start as an independent rep and you just call on stores. And I had all the inner city stores, and when Boys Market was still around, and Hughes and all those guys, Westward Ho up in LA. I called on all those independent markets, and they were good guys. They were super to work with, but and we had a lot of stuff that they sold. The prize was becoming an account executive, though.
Yeah.
Calling on a big headquarter.
But so your philosophy of working hard your whole life, getting in early, throwing boxes early, being ready, did that philosophy also pay off in this new career position? I mean, could you work harder or work hard to be successful in what you were doing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really about when you get to that point, you understand. You really begin to understand what your efforts due to the bottom line of that company.
Mm-hmm.
Like the more that you sell, and we weren't paid commission, we were paid salary. But I can look at my stack of sales and know whether or not I was bringing more income in.
Yeah.
Whether I was increasing volume in those accounts. And I believe that was the way that you moved ahead. Like you showed that you would take it to heart. And that's, it's funny being an entrepreneur now, and entrepreneurs would make the best. I always tell people entrepreneurs would make the best employees
Mm-hmm.
because they look at everything as their own business.
Yeah, sure.
So they try harder. You just try harder. And if someone's going to give me a job, then I'm going to work super, super hard for them. And that's what I did. And at the same time, I was watching the account executives, and they would go out to lunch every day. And how cool would that be? And they'd go out to dinners and things like that. And I thought that would be the coolest thing. So that was my goal, was to call on a Vons, or to call on an Alpha Beta when Alpha Beta was here,
Yeah.
Albertsons, and call on the headquarters. So I worked hard to get to that point and was promoted, and then started running brands. Like I ran the 3M brand and a couple other brands for the company that I worked for. And Bateman was eventually bought by Cook, Boynton, and Hilton, and I was really lucky that the founder of Hilton Brokerage took me under his wing, and he was kind of the same thing. He grew up and he sold Christmas trees,
Wow.
in supermarkets,
Yeah.
and he built his Christmas tree business into one of the largest brokerage companies in the West, calling on some of the biggest chains in the West. But he literally would tell me, like, before he met his wife, that he didn't know which was a salad fork and which was a regular fork to eat with. He had no idea what
Mm-hmm.
place settings were until his wife taught him. But he was one of those guys that just really worked hard.
Yeah, humble beginnings.
Yeah.
Now I know a lot of your story in the brokerage world, and you've had a lot of transitions, working for people, starting your own brokerage firms, having success, stepping away, creating more success.
Right.
What would you say were some of your learnings in and out of those types of transitions?
The hardest thing for me, transitioning from a steady paycheck to owning your own business, is that you don't have that paycheck. And then when I hired people, I wanted to treat people the same way that that people had treated me growing up, and take them under their wing. And that was, I think, more than anything, the most important thing was for me to be able to pass on all of the information and the knowledge that people were so good to me about passing on to other people.
Yeah.
But the biggest hurdle was, not having that steady paycheck and having to work through not having those bills paid, and how to pay the bills, and waiting for checks and things like that to come in. I think that was probably the hardest, most difficult thing.
So
in that transition.
Big leaps of faith in what you were doing and what you were selling and what you were offering.
Absolutely. You go from a brokerage company that's doing, hundreds of millions of dollars in sales and volume, to owning your own brokerage company, and then you're scratching, and you're trying to make it work, and you're trying to grow and get big, and you want to be like that. You want to be like the big brokerage company. We all have that idea that we can grow something into this huge thing.
Yeah.
But it really just became more of, I just enjoyed building something. I enjoyed the process, and that's really what came out of everything. So I enjoyed the process of building something the process of teaching, giving back, the way that I've been brought up. Like I said, I didn't go to college. I had people that took me under their wing and taught me everything. I learned how to do bookkeeping at Stater Brothers. I had managers that would spend time with me. Like, this is the best way to doing it.
Yeah.
Jim Hilton taught me everything to know about how to speak to people.
Yeah.
How to treat people.
I hear so many people in the last 10 years say, you got to work harder, you got to work smarter, not harder, right? We got to work smart. We got to work smart. I don't think there's any substitute for hard work. I think at the end of the day, hard work's required to be successful and to move through and have the forward advancements that so many people want. I think that you can be smart in the process and pay attention and learn and be good at your job from being smart. But I don't think there's a substitute for hard work. And I just see that in your career, that you've worked hard and it's worked out good for you.
I couldn't agree more. There are ways of working smarter. But if you work hard, then you realize you'll come across those times when you realize that there is a different way of doing it. You just don't. You don't work until your bones are bloody and your hands are bloody. You do realize that there's a quicker way of doing things.
Yeah.
I always talk about being smarter. What is smarter? Is the internet smarter? Is that the way to go? I remember when I first started in business, and the first person I worked with, he said, I sent out postcards. He goes, I would mail postcards across the United States, and I would say, this is when I'm going to be there. He wouldn't have to wait for an appointment. He would just send out a postcard and say, I'm going to be here on this day. He'd show up, and he'd have his appointment.
Yeah.
Before email, everything was done by fax. Everything was still done. We were still moving merchandise in boxes at the same rate that we're moving now. It's just everyone expects something today. You send an email. If you don't send a response immediately, there's something wrong. It doesn't matter if it gets there 5 minutes later or 10 minutes later, the response, it's still going to get done. But we live in a society where everything is push, 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 push. I want it today. I want it now. And sometimes that creates problems, I think, more than it helps.
Yeah.
And we try to teach our kids that, which and I know. Everything is instantaneous. My son is swiping memes back and forth, and everything is so. I had this conversation with him last night. I said, everything with you is ambiguous because everything changes so fast that you won't make a set decision. And I said, that's going to hurt you in the long run.
Yeah. And I think that just goes, again, back to working hard and having a success through that hard work. And, I think that technology is a wonderful thing to have, and it allows us to be smarter and it gives us tools, but it also falls along the lines of working harder and doing the right things.
Right.
You mentioned something about the process of being a broker and creating and doing. You talked about those sets in the grocery stores where all the vitamins and supplements are, that you were a part of that revolution to put those sets in stores that we all see now. I know I go through Target now, and there's the protein aisle or whatever it's called. You had a hand in that, right?
We did. So, I opened up a health food brokerage company. So we were one of the leading health food brokerage companies on the West Coast. And so we were moving natural food into grocery stores. And the thing people don't realize, and it's really important to understand, is grocery stores don't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
They only make on average of 2 to 3% is all they make in margin profit after it's all said and done. Some products, they don't make any money at all.
Yeah, loss leaders.
Loss leaders, like oatmeal and things like that, they don't make any money on. But what they realized was health food stores were making 50% margin on health food products. So they said, gosh, man, if we can bring in health food products into the store, we can make 50%. And after everything's done, we'd make a heck of a lot more money than we would selling mayonnaise and oatmeal.
Yeah.
But they had to have a good understanding of what product mix worked. and things like that. What you needed to have, how you can't put a 25,000 square foot store in 6 feet of shelf.
Yeah.
So we worked with the grocery stores in developing the sets that you see now today in the grocery stores that are now mostly integrated. But we were the first brokers to really put that push into the stores, into Safeway nationally, and Vons and all the other stores that you see.
I love seeing things out in the marketplace or in the world, and you know the story behind how it got there. That's why I made you bring it up. I walked through the supplement aisle yesterday at Target. I'm like, hey, Richard had something to do with this, some way, somehow.
Yeah.
I don't want to jump too far ahead in your life, but we've covered a lot of territory here. Eventually you retired from your brokerage firm and you thought you were going to sit at home and enjoy your family, but instead you got the whip to start a new business.
Well, it was, we had the brokerage company and we just had Jaden. And my wife isn't, and I have to, props to my wife. I love her to death, and she's just an incredible woman, put up with so much. But one of my clients in the brokerage business asked me if I would go to work for them.
Uh-huh.
And so that's kind of how I really got into the supplement business, the vitamin and mineral and supplement business and sports nutrition. I'd always been in it. I'd worked with Joe Weider for a really long time with the Joe Weider Company, probably for over 13 years in my career as a broker. Most people thought I worked for Weider, but they were a client.
Yeah.
And Natrol was one of the companies that I had been a broker for a really long time, and they asked me if I would come to work for them, which I eventually did. My wife was happy because then I would have a steady paycheck.
Yeah, that helps.
I just went to work as a regional manager. I said, "Look, I've owned businesses. I don't need to say I'm a president of anything anymore. Like everyone's like, oh, so what's your title?" Like I said, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The titles don't mean anything. I've done that, been there. It doesn't mean anything to me. I just want to go to work.
Yeah.
And so I went to work for Natrol and eventually ended up running that company. And taking it to about $120 million from about 78.
You were involved in a pretty good financial raise with those guys too.
We did. As soon as I was promoted and took over running the company, we wanted to expand the company and grow it and increase our manufacturing side. So I had created an offer letter, and we went out and did a road show, which was my first road show, which again, those are things that you're learning as you're going. And so at 45, I think it was, or 46, I was running off to New York and all these Chicago and doing these road shows in front of investment groups. And Cerberus was one of the groups that we worked with, and luckily they ended up funding us a good amount of money. Great firm to work with. And so I learned about raising money.
Yeah.
Pretty
incredible.
Pretty incredible. I mean, I've through the career, I've learned manufacturing. I've learned a little bit about everything, but that was something I was not prepared for. But people were very, very patient. I mean, I understood the operations of the business. I understood the inner workings of a store. I've done pretty much everything you can within a market through my career. So I learned from doing. And so we ended up picking up a large cap raise.
So as that career, that portion of your career started slowing down, and you had to make a decision to continue with them, or go do something else, you decided to leave the company and stay at home and be with your kids.
I did. 5 years before that, 4 years before that, before I left, I think maybe a couple years before that, I was actually training for my first Ironman, and I was hit by a car and almost killed. I was on my bike and I was put on life support, but I was still running the company. It was funny. I was still running the company from ICU, and the nurses would run in because people would come from the office and they would come and sit down with me, and someone had to do it. So they would come in and they'd ask me questions, and the nurse would run in and said, "Your blood pressure's going way up. You guys need to get out of here. You need to leave. He's not supposed to be doing that." But I decided that it was time. I mean, I had taken the company where I wanted to take it. It was moving in a different direction, some ways that I didn't agree with.
Yeah.
And so I decided that I was going to leave, and I was going to spend more time with my family, because
Yeah.
I was basically gone 7 days a week.